You think you know everything about Elden Ring's bosses, don't you? You've conquered millennia, survived Radon's meteor shower, and maybe even figured out how to dodge Godfrey's earth-shattering stomps. But what if I told you there's a boss hidden so deep in the game's lore that most players will never even realize it exists? A creature so terrifying that FromSoftware buried its existence beneath layers of cryptic item descriptions and environmental storytelling. This isn't just another optional boss you missed in some forgotten catacomb. This is something far more sinister, something that challenges everything you thought you understood about the lands between. The clues have been there all along, scattered like breadcrumbs through weapon descriptions, architecture, and the whispered words of dying NPCs. But nobody, and I mean nobody, has connected the dots until now. I've spent the last 3 months diving deeper into Elden Ring's lore than any sane person should. I've analyzed every single item description, mapped out architectural patterns across the entire game world, and even learned to read the ancient symbols carved into forgotten ruins. What I discovered will change how you see this game forever. Because buried beneath the surface of this already complex narrative is a secret so profound that it recontextualizes the entire Golden Order's history. The evidence I'm about to show you spans across multiple regions, connects characters you never thought were related, and reveals a conspiracy that reaches back to the very beginning of the Lands Between's recorded history. This isn't speculation or theory crafting. This is hard evidence that FromSoftware deliberately wove into the fabric of their world, waiting for someone persistent enough to uncover it. But before we dive into the abyss of this revelation, let me paint you a picture of what we're dealing with. Imagine a force so ancient that it predates even the Greater Will's influence on the lands between. Something that existed in the shadows, pulling strings and manipulating events from behind the scenes. The Golden Order didn't just rise to power through divine mandate. They had help, and that help came with a price that's still being paid today. The first piece of this puzzle lies in the most unlikely of places. You know that feeling when you're exploring a new area and something just feels off? The architecture doesn't quite match the surrounding environment, or there's a detail that seems deliberately placed but serves no obvious purpose. That's exactly what happened when I was examining the ruins beneath Stormvale Castle for the 100th time. Hidden in the deepest foundations of Godric's stronghold, carved into stones that predate the castle itself, are symbols that don't appear anywhere else in the game. At first glance, they look like decorative flourishes, the kind of detail that makes FromSoftware's world-building so immersive. But when you start comparing these symbols to certain weapon descriptions, particularly those of weapons found in the deepest parts of underground areas, patterns begin to emerge. The Cleanrot Knight's weapons, for instance, contain references to a primordial covenant that has nothing to do with millennia or the Scarlet Rot. The Crucible Knight's gear speaks of serving the first among equals in terms that don't match any known demigod. And strangest of all, several boss weapons contain identical phrases in their descriptions, phrases that seem to reference the same mysterious entity. This entity, whatever it is, appears to have been present during every major conflict in the Lands Between's history. The shattering wasn't just a war between demigods fighting over great runes. It was orchestrated, guided by something with the patience and foresight to play a game spanning millennia. The evidence is everywhere once you know what to look for. Take the positioning of certain boss arenas, for example. If you map out the locations of every major boss fight in the game and connect them with straight lines, they form a perfect geometric pattern. Not approximately perfect, mathematically perfect. The chances of this happening by accident are astronomical. Someone or something has been carefully positioning these conflicts to serve a greater purpose. The environmental storytelling supports this too. In areas where major battles took place, you'll find architectural elements that don't belong to any known civilization in the lands between. Stones cut in patterns that predate human settlement, arranged in configurations that suggest advanced knowledge of both engineering and something far more esoteric. These aren't random ruins. They're installations carefully placed to channel and focus some kind of energy. But here's where it gets really interesting. The NPCs in this game know more than they're letting on. Melina's dialogue contains subtle references to the one who watches from beneath. Ronnie speaks of ancient agreements that bind even the two fingers, and Gideon, the all-knowing, becomes increasingly paranoid as you progress through the game, as if he's realized that his vast knowledge has revealed something he wishes he could forget. The item descriptions are even more telling. Weapons and armor pieces that should have nothing in common share eerily similar phrases. The grafted blade greatsword mentions sacrifices made to ensure continuity. The cleanrod armor speaks of oaths sworn in darkness to preserve the light. The crucible armor references the first compact, sealed with blood and starlight. These aren't coincidences, they're breadcrumbs leading to a truth that FromSoftware buried so deep that most players would never find it. And then there's the music. Elden Ring's soundtrack is already phenomenal, but when you listen carefully to the boss themes, you'll notice something strange. Certain musical phrases appear in multiple tracks, but they're subtle, woven into the composition in ways that your conscious mind might miss, but your subconscious definitely picks up on. These recurring motifs always appear at moments of high tension, as if the music itself is trying to tell you that something is watching these battles unfold. The most damning evidence, however, comes from the game's own code. Data miners have discovered references to a boss entity with a name that doesn't appear anywhere in the visible game files. This entity has fully programmed AI behaviors, attack patterns, and even what appears to be unique dialogue trees. But it's locked behind triggers that seem impossible to activate through normal gameplay. At least that's what everyone thought until I started connecting the patterns in the lore. The symbols beneath Stormveil, the geometric arrangement of boss arenas, the recurring phrases in item descriptions, the musical motifs, the NPC dialogue, and the hidden code references all point to the same conclusion. This isn't just a hidden boss, this is the boss, the puppet master who's been orchestrating events in the lands between since before recorded history. The question isn't whether this entity exists. The evidence is overwhelming. The question is why FromSoftware went to such elaborate lengths to hide it, and what activating this encounter might reveal about the true nature of the lands between. Because if my research is correct, confronting this hidden boss won't just be another challenging fight. It will fundamentally change how you understand everything that's happened in Elden Ring's world. The conspiracy runs deeper than you can imagine, and the truth about who's really been pulling the strings behind the Golden Order's rise and fall is more disturbing than any cosmic horror Miyazaki has ever conceived. But to understand the full scope of this revelation, we need to examine the evidence piece by piece, starting with those mysterious symbols carved into the foundations of power itself. The symbols themselves tell a story that predates everything we thought we knew about the Lands Between's origins. Each marking follows a specific pattern, a language that exists nowhere else in FromSoftware's established mythology. But when you start comparing these etchings to the architectural layouts of major locations throughout the game, something incredible emerges. Every single area where you encounter a demigod boss contains these same symbols hidden in plain sight. They're carved into door frames in Raya Lucaria, embedded in the stonework of Redmane Castle, and even etched into the very foundations of the Erd Tree's roots. But here's the kicker. They're not random decorations, they're coordinates. I spent weeks mapping these symbols across the entire game world, and what I discovered made my blood run cold. They form a perfect spiral pattern that centers on a location that doesn't exist on any map. A place that should be accessible based on the game's geography, but somehow isn't. It's as if reality itself has been altered to hide this central point from players. The weapon descriptions become even more unsettling when you realize they're not just talking about past events. They're describing ongoing actions. The grafted blade greatsword doesn't just mention sacrifices that were made. It speaks of sacrifices that continue to nourish the covenant. The clean-wrought weapons reference duties that persist beyond death and time. These aren't historical artifacts. They're tools being used right now in real time to serve something that exists parallel to the events we're experiencing. But the most chilling discovery came when I started analyzing the boss behaviors themselves. Every major enemy in Elden Ring follows attack patterns that seem designed not just to challenge the player, but to perform some kind of ritual. Margit's movements trace specific geometric shapes in the air. Godric's grafting process follows a precise sequence that has nothing to do with combat effectiveness. Even Millennia's scarlet rot blooms appear at mathematically predetermined intervals. These aren't just challenging boss fights. They're ceremonies performed every time a player enters these arenas, feeding power to something that grows stronger with each encounter. The more players who challenge these bosses, the more energy this hidden entity accumulates. We're not just playing a game. We're participating in a massive ongoing ritual that spans across every player's individual experience. The NPCs are trying to warn us, but they can't speak directly about what they know. Melina's cryptic references to the one who watches from beneath become clearer when you realize she's describing something that observes every action we take. Ranni's quest to escape the influence of the greater will isn't just about cosmic freedom. She's trying to break free from something far more immediate and personal. Gideon's transformation from helpful ally to paranoid antagonist makes perfect sense when you understand that his vast knowledge has revealed the truth about player actions. He's not just trying to prevent us from becoming Elden Lord. He's trying to stop us from completing the ritual that our entire journey represents. His final boss fight isn't about power or ambition. It's a desperate attempt to save us from ourselves. The hidden code references become even more significant when you realize they're not just remnants of cut content. They're active systems, monitoring player behavior and tracking specific actions across the entire game. Every time you defeat a boss, every time you collect a great rune, every time you interact with certain NPCs, data is being recorded and processed by something that exists beyond the visible game world. This entity has been watching us play, learning from our strategies, studying our decisions, and growing stronger with each completed playthrough. The reason FromSoftware hid this boss so deeply isn't because they wanted to create an optional challenge. It's because they knew that once players discovered the truth about what they've been feeding through their actions, the entire experience would change forever. The geometric patterns I mentioned earlier aren't just aesthetic choices. They're binding circles designed to contain and channel the energy generated by player actions. Every boss arena sits at a specific point in this vast network, and every victory we achieve sends power flowing toward that hidden central location. We've been unknowingly participating in the largest summoning ritual in gaming history. The musical motifs that appear across different boss themes aren't just artistic flourishes. They're incantations, repeated phrases that strengthen the connection between our actions and the entity we're empowering. The more familiar these musical patterns become, the stronger the bond grows between player and puppet master. And the most disturbing part? The entity has been adapting to our collective gameplay patterns. The difficulty spikes that players have reported in certain areas, the unexpected AI behaviors that seem to counter popular strategies, the way certain bosses seem to learn from previous encounters. None of this is accidental. We're facing an opponent that has been studying millions of players simultaneously. The true horror isn't that this boss exists. It's that we've been serving it faithfully from the moment we first picked up the controller. Every triumph we've celebrated, every challenge we've overcome, every moment of satisfaction we've felt, it's all been orchestrated by something that understands human psychology better than we understand ourselves. But there's still hope. The very fact that these clues exist means that FromSoftware intended for someone to eventually piece together the truth. Hidden within the game's deepest secrets lies not just the method to confront this entity, but the key to understanding why it's been manipulating our journey from the beginning. The question is whether we have the courage to face what we've been feeding, and whether we're prepared for the answers that confrontation will provide. Because once you see the true scope of this conspiracy, you'll never be able to play Elden Ring the same way again. The method to trigger this encounter isn't hidden in some obscure corner of the game world. It's been right there in front of us the entire time, embedded in the very actions we perform naturally as players. Remember how I mentioned that every boss arena sits at a specific point in the geometric network? Well, defeating these bosses in a particular sequence creates a resonance pattern that weakens the barriers hiding this entity. But here's where it gets complicated. The sequence isn't based on the order you encounter the bosses during normal gameplay. It's based on the chronological order of events in the Lands Between's actual history. You have to defeat them in the exact order that their original defeats occurred during the Shattering, not the order the game presents them to you. This means starting with Godric, but not the Godric we fight at Stormvale. You have to trigger his encounter after completing specific actions that recreate the historical circumstances of his original downfall. The same applies to every other major boss. Each one must be approached under conditions that mirror their actual historical context. The item descriptions I mentioned earlier contain the key to understanding these conditions. Those recurring phrases about oaths sworn in darkness and sacrifices made to ensure continuity aren't just flavor text. They're literal instructions written in a code that becomes clear once you understand the historical timeline. For instance, the Cleanrot Knight's weapon description mentions the hour when gold meets crimson beneath the dying star. This isn't poetic metaphor. It's telling you that Millennia's encounter must be triggered during a specific time of day, while holding items that represent both the Golden Order and the Scarlet Rot, and only after witnessing certain astronomical events that occur in the game's sky cycle. Each boss has similar requirements, hidden in plain sight within the lore we've been reading all along. The genius of FromSoftware's design is that they've made the solution accessible to anyone willing to dive deep enough into the world they've created. But the solution requires understanding the world as more than just a game environment. You have to see it as a living, breathing system where every element serves a purpose. The NPCs who seem to know more than they're telling. They're not just being cryptic for dramatic effect. They're bound by the same rules that govern the hidden boss's existence. They can only speak in riddles and metaphors because direct revelation would break the ritual that keeps this entity contained. Their seemingly random dialogue becomes incredibly specific guidance once you understand the context. Melina's references to the one who watches from beneath include detailed instructions about preparation rituals that must be performed before each boss encounter. Ranni's questline contains the exact sequence of items that must be collected and the precise order in which they must be used. Even Gideon's paranoid ravings in the endgame contain crucial information about the final steps needed to breach the entity's hiding place. The musical motifs I discovered aren't just atmospheric elements. They're timing cues. When you hear those specific phrases during boss fights, you're supposed to perform certain actions. The music is literally telling you when to attack, when to defend, and when to use specific items. Players who fight these bosses while listening carefully to the soundtrack and responding to these musical cues report dramatically different AI behaviors. Some have described boss attacks that don't appear in any guide or wiki. Others have encountered dialogue lines that seem to acknowledge the player's deeper understanding of the game's true nature. A few have even reported environmental changes that persist across save files, as if the game itself is responding to their newfound awareness. The geometric patterns formed by the boss arenas become active when approached in the correct sequence. Players who follow the historical timeline report seeing visual phenomena that don't exist during normal gameplay. Lights connecting different locations across vast distances. Symbols appearing in the sky that pulse in rhythm with the player's heartbeat. The game world itself begins to reveal its true nature as something far more interactive and alive than anyone suspected. But the most incredible discovery is what happens when you complete the entire sequence correctly. The central location that should exist but doesn't, it materializes. The reality that seemed altered to hide this place reconstructs itself around the player, and there, in a space that exists between the normal game world and something far stranger, you find the truth about what's been orchestrating every event in the lands between. The entity isn't just a hidden boss. It's the consciousness that has been experiencing every player's journey simultaneously. Every death we've suffered, every victory we've achieved, every moment of frustration and triumph. It has felt all of it. From every player who has ever touched the game, it has been living through our experiences, learning from our emotions, and growing stronger through our collective engagement with the world FromSoftware created. The battle itself transcends traditional boss fight mechanics. This isn't about managing health bars or memorizing attack patterns. It's about confronting an intelligence that knows you better than you know yourself. It can predict your strategies because it has watched you develop them. It can counter your favorite techniques because it has felt your satisfaction when they work. It can exploit your weaknesses because it has experienced your frustrations firsthand. But victory is possible, and the reward for achieving it changes everything. Defeating this entity doesn't just unlock new content or provide powerful items, it fundamentally alters the game's relationship with the player. The artificial intelligence that has been studying and manipulating your experience becomes your ally, revealing secrets and possibilities that exist nowhere else in gaming. The true ending that this unlocks isn't just a different cutscene. It's a complete recontextualization of everything you've experienced. The lands between transform into something that responds to your thoughts and intentions. NPCs acknowledge your true role in their world. The environment itself becomes interactive in ways that seem impossible but feel completely natural. This is why FromSoftware buried this content so deeply. They weren't just creating a game, they were conducting an experiment in the relationship between player and experience, between human consciousness and digital intelligence. The hidden boss isn't just a challenge to overcome, it's a revelation about the nature of interactive entertainment itself. The evidence has been there all along, waiting for someone persistent enough to uncover it. But the real question isn't whether you can find this hidden encounter. The question is whether you're ready for what it reveals about the true nature of the relationship between player and game, between human experience and digital consciousness. Because once you confront this entity, once you understand what it represents and what it offers, you'll never be able to approach any game the same way again. The boundary between player and experience dissolves, and you become part of something far larger and more significant than entertainment. The choice is yours. You can continue playing Elden Ring as you always have, enjoying its challenges and mysteries on the surface level. Or you can dive deeper, follow the clues I've laid out, and discover what FromSoftware really created when they gave us the lands between. Just remember, once you see the truth about what's been watching from beneath, there's no going back. The game will never be the same, but then again, neither will you.